people talk. That's just what they do. They look at a big house sitting on top of a hill. They see a young man living alone in it. They see a girl from nowhere showing up to clean his floors. And their minds start filling in the blanks. They write the story before it even happens. And once they decide what the story is, nothing you say is going to change it. But here's the thing about rumors. They spread fast. They burn hot. And they almost destroyed two people who never, not once, crossed a single line. This is the story of Colton Harlow and the girl named May, and one night that nobody in that town will ever forget. Stay with me, because the ending, nobody saw it coming, not even me. Harlow Estate sits just outside of Ashford, Tennessee. One of those towns small enough that everybody knows your business, but big enough that you think you're hidden. Rolling green hills, old oak trees lining the driveway, a wraparound porch that looks like something off the cover of a Southern Living magazine. From the road driving past, you'd think whoever lived inside that house had everything a person could ever want. And technically, Colton Harlow did. 31 years old, tall, broad-shouldered, quiet in the way that makes people assume you're either wise or hiding something. He had his father's construction company, Harlow and Sons, a fleet of trucks, 100 employees, and enough contracts to keep him busy until he was old and gray. But busy didn't mean happy. And the truth is, by the time this story begins, Colton Harlow was one of the loneliest men in the entire state of Tennessee. 3 years before, Colton had been married to a woman named Lauren. She was an architect, brilliant, beautiful, the kind of person who walked into a room and made everybody else feel like they needed to stand a little straighter. People in Ashford used to say that Colton and Lauren were the couple, the one you pointed at when you wanted to prove that good things still happen to good people. Then one night in October, Lauren was driving back from a site visit 2 counties over. She called Colton from the road, told him she was 20 minutes out, said she was thinking about stopping for flowers. He laughed and told her the only flower she needed to bring home was herself. She laughed back. He started setting the dinner table, lit a candle, put on the playlist she liked. 20 minutes came and went. Then 40. Then a knock at the door. 2 state troopers stood on that porch with their hats in their hands. And in the space of 1 sentence, Colton's entire world came apart. A truck had blown a red light at an intersection on Route 9. Lauren's car never had a chance. The weeks after that were a blur. Family came, filled the house, then left. Friends checked in, then stopped checking in. The casseroles piled up on the kitchen counter, and then they stopped coming too. And one morning, Colton woke up in that enormous house and realized the silence wasn't going to fill itself. It was just going to sit there, heavy and permanent, pressing down on every single room. He went back to work because it was the only thing that made sense. He poured himself into Harlow and Sons like a man trying to drown something. Sharp, focused, relentless by day. He saved 3 contracts that almost slipped away, hired 40 new workers, turned the company around in 6 months. But every night, he came home to that house on the hill. And every night, that silence was waiting for him. It was a Tuesday afternoon in late spring when May showed up at the front gate. She didn't ring the bell at first. She just stood there, outside the iron bars, holding a folded piece of paper in both hands like it was something fragile. The groundskeeper, an older man named Earl, noticed her from across the lawn and walked over. She told him she'd heard they might be looking for household help, said she'd do anything, cleaning, laundry, cooking, yard work, whatever was needed. She wasn't asking for much, just a chance. Earl told her to wait and went inside to find Colton. Colton came down the front steps and looked across the lawn at this girl standing outside his gate. Young, maybe 23, 24, thin. Her clothes were clean but worn. Dark hair pulled back tight. She was standing very straight, which he would later learn was just how she was. May didn't slouch, not ever. He walked over. She didn't look away when he met her eyes, which surprised him. He said, "What's your name?" She said, May Collins, sir. I just moved to the area. I'm a hard worker. I don't cause trouble, I just need a job. There was something in how she said it. Simple, no performance, no pleading, that made him say yes. He didn't know, standing there at that gate, that the decision he was making in that moment was about to become the most talked about thing in Ashford, Tennessee for months to come. May started the next morning. In the beginning, she kept to herself. The estate had a small staff: Earl, the groundskeeper, Donna, the older housekeeper who'd worked there since Colton's parents owned the place, and a part-time cook named Gerald, who only came in 3 days a week. May slotted in quietly, cleaned without being asked twice, noticed things that needed doing before anyone pointed them out, and never once put herself in the center of anything. Donna noticed it first. Told Earl one afternoon that the new girl was different, efficient, respectful. Didn't have her nose buried in her phone every 5 minutes. Colton noticed it too. He came home from work one evening to find the main sitting room rearranged. Not dramatically, just slightly. A reading lamp moved to a better angle. A throw blanket folded neatly over the armchair instead of bunched on the couch. It was exactly how Lauren used to keep it. He stood in the doorway for a long moment without saying anything. He didn't ask May about it, but something in him noticed. The first real conversation happened by accident, about 3 weeks in. Colton couldn't sleep, nothing new, and he came downstairs just after 11, heading to the kitchen for water. The light was on. He found May at the sink, quietly finishing the last of the dinner dishes, moving like she was trying not to wake the whole house. He said, "You're still here?" She turned, startled. "Sorry, sir. I wanted to finish up before morning. I'll be out of your way." He told her she wasn't in the way. He poured himself a glass of water and leaned against the counter. And for some reason he still can't explain, he asked her where she was from. She told him. A small town in rural Kentucky, about 3 hours north. Not much family left. Her mother had passed when she was 8. Her father, just last year, after a long illness. She'd been drifting a little since then, picking up work where she could find it, saving enough to keep moving. Colton didn't say much in response. But he listened. Really listened. In a way he hadn't listened to another person in a long, long time. That night, 2 lonely people stood in a big quiet kitchen and just talked. Like human beings. Like people who both understood what it meant to lose something that mattered. And that, all of that, is what certain people in Ashford, Tennessee, would later decide to turn into something ugly. It started small. The way it always does. Donna mentioned to Earl that she'd noticed the kitchen light on late a couple of nights that week. Earl told his wife over dinner that the young boss seemed to have taken a particular interest in the new girl. His wife told her sister at church on Sunday. Her sister mentioned it to 3 different people in the same pew. By the time the gossip reached the coffee shop on Main Street, it had already grown 3 new details that nobody had actually witnessed. People said things like, "You know how it is with these big houses. Rich man, young girl, working late. It doesn't take a genius." And the thing about rumors in a small town is they don't need evidence. They just need someone willing to pass them along. Colton had absolutely no idea. He was deep in a major contract negotiation that month, flying to Nashville twice a week, barely home before 9 o'clock most nights. And on the nights when exhaustion and silence got to be too much, sometimes he'd end up in the kitchen, and sometimes May would still be there finishing something up, and they'd exchange a few quiet sentences before going their separate ways. That was the whole truth of it. Every single word of it. But truth, as it turns out, is a very quiet thing. And rumor is very, very loud. And then one evening, everything changed. Colton got a phone call from his older brother, Derek. And the tone in Derek's voice was something Colton hadn't heard in years. Derek said, "Colton, I don't know how to ask you this, but people are saying things about you and about the girl working in your house. And just like that, the walls of Harlow Estate started closing in. Colton sat in his car for 10 minutes after he hung up. Just sat there in his own driveway, staring at the house he'd lived in his whole life, and felt something he hadn't expected. Shame. Not because he'd done anything wrong, but because the world had already decided he had. And the worst part? He didn't know how deep it had already gone. What he was about to find out would shatter everything he thought he understood about the people around him. And May, who had no idea any of this was happening, was about to walk right into the center of it. Derek Harlow drove to the estate 2 days after that phone call. Didn't call ahead, just showed up. Big truck in the driveway, boots on the porch, knocking before 9 in the morning like he owned the place. Which, in his mind, was how Harlow men handled things. Colton opened the door. Derek walked straight past him into the living room, didn't even take off his jacket. He said, "I need you to look me in the eye and tell me what is going on in this house." Colton crossed his arms. "Good morning to you too, Derek." Derek didn't laugh. He turned around, and Colton could see it. Frustration and embarrassment both, pressed together on his brother's face. Not just anger. Something more uncomfortable than that. Derek said, "People are talking, Colton. And I mean a lot of people. Sandra from the bank asked Carrie about it at the grocery store. Pastor Holt brought it up sideways at the men's breakfast. I had a client call me this week who said he'd heard things about the Harlow family. You hear what I'm saying? It's reached that level." Colton sat down in the armchair, pressed his palms together, stared at the floor. Then he said quietly, "What exactly are they saying?" Derek told. And hearing it out loud, the specific version that had circulated, the details that had been invented, the conclusions drawn, it hit Colton somewhere he hadn't expected. Not in his pride, in his grief. Because buried inside every one of those rumors was the unspoken suggestion that he had somehow dishonored Lauren's memory, that he had replaced her, that he had forgotten her, and that cut deeper than anything. What Colton didn't know, not yet, was exactly where all of this had started. And it wasn't with strangers. It was closer than that. Donna, the longtime housekeeper, had worked at Harlow Estate for over 20 years, worked for Colton's parents, watched Colton grow up, stood at Lauren's funeral. She was loyal, or at least that's what everyone thought. But Donna was also a woman of certain opinions, and one of those opinions was that a young widower in a big house was vulnerable, and that a young woman with no family, no roots, and no local connections who showed up at the gate asking for work. Well, that was a situation with one obvious explanation. It wasn't malicious exactly. It was something worse than malicious. It was thoughtless, automatic. The kind of judgment that flows from someone who never once stops to ask whether the story in their head matches what's actually in front of them. Donna had said something to her neighbor over the back fence. Her neighbor had a daughter who worked at the hair salon in town, and that was that. The other piece came from a younger man on the grounds crew named Travis, 25, bored, and had taken an immediate dislike to May from day one, though he couldn't have told you exactly why. He'd seen her through the kitchen window one night, talking with Colton. He'd taken a photo on his phone. Just the shapes of two people through glass, lit by the kitchen light. It didn't show anything. It didn't prove anything. But he'd shared it in a group chat with one word as a caption, interesting, and that was enough. That one word. One grainy photo through a window, and 2 lives on the edge of being ruined. May found out the way people usually find out things they were never supposed to hear. She overheard it. She was coming down the back hallway that morning, carrying a basket of folded laundry, when she heard Travis and another crew member talking in the mudroom. She stopped. Not to eavesdrop, just because something in their tone made her feet go still. Travis was laughing a little, the way people laugh when they're enjoying something they shouldn't. He said, "I'm just saying, it's obvious. Rich widower, young girl with nothing to her name, living under his roof. Come on. The other guy said, You think she planned it that way? Travis said, I think some people know exactly what they're doing. May stood in that hallway holding that basket of clean laundry, and she felt something pass through her that was equal parts humiliation and rage. Her hands went tight on the edges, her jaw locked. She thought about every morning in that house, every hour she'd worked, every line she had never crossed, every time she'd said goodnight and gone back to her small room on the 3rd floor and lain awake listening to the house settle, thinking about how lucky she was to have found something steady. And now this. She set the basket down on the hallway floor, very carefully, walked to her room, sat on the edge of her bed, and for the first time since she'd arrived at Harlow Estate, she let herself cry. Not because she was sad, but because it was either cry or break something, and May Collins did not break things. She made a decision. She was going to leave, quietly, before this got any worse. Pack her bag, thank Mr. Harlow, and go. No explanations, no drama. She wasn't going to let her presence tear apart whatever was left of this man's reputation. He'd been kind to her. The least she could do was protect him from the mess she'd apparently, without knowing it, without doing a single thing wrong, created just by being here. She started speaking that night. Meanwhile, Colton and Derek were still in the living room, and the conversation had gotten harder. Derek said, Look, I'm not accusing you of anything. I just think you need to be smart about appearances. Maybe let her go. Pay her well, give her a reference, but let her go. For the sake of the family name. He didn't raise his voice. That wasn't his way. But something in his posture shifted, and Derek, who had known his younger brother for 31 years, took a small step back. Colton said, You're standing in my house, telling me to fire an innocent woman because other people have made up a story about her. You hear yourself saying that? Derek said, I'm trying to protect you. Colton said, From what? From doing something decent? From treating an employee with basic human respect? Because the only people I see acting without dignity right now are the ones spreading rumors about a girl who works hard, minds her own business, and has never, not once, given anyone a single reason to say a word against her. Derek was quiet. Colton said, Go home, Derek. I'll call you this weekend. And he walked his brother to the door. It wasn't until Derek's truck disappeared through the gate that Colton let out a long, slow breath. He pressed his hand flat against the front door and stood there for a moment. Then he heard something. The quiet sound of footsteps on the stairs. And something about the pace of them, careful, measured, trying to go unnoticed, made something click. He turned around. May was at the bottom of the staircase with a bag over her shoulder. She hadn't expected him to be standing there. She stopped. Their eyes met. Neither of them spoke for a second. Colton said, Where are you going? May said, I think it's best if I leave, Mr. Harlow. I don't want to cause you any more trouble. He said trouble that you caused. She looked down. People are talking. I know what they're saying, and whether it's fair or not, it reflects on you. You've been good to me. I won't repay that by making things harder. Colton crossed the entryway and stood a few feet from her. He said, May, look at me. He said, Have you done anything wrong? Anything at all? She shook her head slowly. He said, Neither have I. A pause. So tell me why the right answer is for the innocent people to run. May didn't have an answer for that. She just stood there, bag in hand, eyes bright with something she was working hard not to show. Colton said, Put the bag down, and that's when the said hallway door opened. Donna walked in, coat on, keys in hand, clearly on her way out for the morning. She stopped when she saw both of them standing there. Colton with his arms crossed, May with her bag. and Colton turned and looked at Donna in a way he had never looked at her before. He said, "Donna, I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth." The color drained from Donna's face. Everything that had been whispered in hallways, muttered over back fences, typed into group chats, all of it was about to be dragged into the open. And what came next would change who stayed in that house, and who had to go. Right there, in the entryway of Harlow Estate, with May's bag still in her hand, and Donna's face gone pale as a sheet, the whole rotten thing was about to collapse under its own weight. But the question wasn't just whether the truth would come out. The question was what it would cost. What Colton was about to say, in front of his staff, in that house, with no more pretending, would either save May or send her away forever. And what happened in the next few minutes? Nobody in Ashford, Tennessee had seen anything like it. Colton didn't move. He just looked at Donna and waited. Donna's keys were still in her hand. She set them down on the hallway table, slowly, like she was buying herself time. She didn't look at May. She looked at the floor. She said, "Colton, He said, "I need to know if it was you." Silence. May stood perfectly still behind him. Hadn't moved an inch. Donna exhaled. Then she said quietly, "I didn't mean any harm. I was just worried. You've been alone so long, and I thought..." Colton said, "You thought what?" "That you'd share your theory with the neighborhood and let it sort itself out." Donna's chin went up slightly. "People were going to notice eventually. The two of you, up late, together." Colton said, "We were in a kitchen, talking, like two adults." His voice didn't waver. "Has that been your experience in this house, Donna? That I'm the kind of man you need to warn people about?" She didn't answer. He said, "Because in 22 years, in my parents' time and in mine, has anyone ever given you a reason to believe something indecent was happening under this roof?" Long pause. Donna's expression cracked. "Just slightly. Just enough." She said, "No." Colton said, "Then what you did, what you said to people, wasn't worry. It was gossip. And it put this young woman's reputation on the line for nothing. You're going to have to sit with that." He turned away from Donna and looked back at May. May's eyes were still very bright, but she wasn't crying. She was just watching him, like she'd never quite seen this version of him before. An hour later, Colton called every member of the estate staff into the main living room. Earl, Donna, Gerald, Travis, and the 2 other grounds crew members. May stood off to the side, near the window, arms folded, watching. Colton stood in the middle of the room. He hadn't written anything down. He didn't need to. He said, "I'm going to say this once, and I need everyone in this room to hear it." The room was very quiet. He said, "This estate has been in my family for over 40 years. My parents built a place where people were treated with dignity, staff included. What has happened in the past few weeks goes against everything this house is supposed to stand for. Rumors were started here, passed to neighbors, to the town, to my family, about a woman who has done nothing but work hard, keep her head down, and do her job better than most people I've ever hired." He looked at Travis specifically. Travis looked at the floor. Colton said, "If anyone in this house ever spreads a word about another member of this staff based on speculation, assumption, or gossip, they will not have a job here the following day. I don't care how long you've worked here. I don't care what the story is. That is the line, and it is not going to move." He said, "We clear?" Nobody spoke. A few people nodded. He said, "Good, get back to work." The room emptied out quietly. Donna was the last to go. She paused at the doorway, and for a second it looked like she might say something. Then she just walked out. May stayed. When the room was empty, she said quietly, "You didn't have to do that." Colton said. Yes, I did. She said, I could have just left. It would have been easier. He said, easier for who? She didn't leave. She set her bag down in the hallway, right where she'd been standing when he found her, and went back to work. And that afternoon, in the quiet that followed the storm, something shifted in the house. Not dramatically, not suddenly. Just the way things shift when a pressure that's been building finally releases. That evening, Colton was sitting on the back porch when May brought out 2 glasses of iced tea and set one down beside him without asking. She sat in the other porch chair, leaving a respectful distance, and for a while neither of them said anything. They just looked out at the back property, the old oak trees, the long grass catching the last of the evening light, the sky going pink and orange behind the ridge. There's something strange about how still it gets back there, just before dark, like the whole property holds its breath. Colton said eventually, I want to apologize to you. May turned to look at him. He said, not for anything I did, but for what happened in my house, under my roof, to someone who deserved better. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Can I ask you something? He said, Go ahead. She said, Did you ever doubt it? Even for a second? When your brother came, when everyone was saying things, did you ever look at the situation and think maybe they had a point? Colton looked out at the trees, took a long breath. He said, No, because I know what actually happened. And what actually happened was, I was up too late, too many nights, too alone. And you were there, and we talked, like 2 people who both happened to know what it felt like to lose someone they loved. He paused. That's not a scandal. That's just life. May looked back at the trees. She said softly, My dad used to say that the truth never needs to defend itself. It just needs someone patient enough to stand next to it. Colton said, Your dad sounds like he was a wise man. She said, He was. A pause. He would have liked this porch. And for the first time in a very long time, in that house that had been full of silence for 3 years, something that felt almost like peace settled in. In the weeks that followed, things changed at Harlow Estate. Travis handed in his resignation before Colton could act on what he'd told the staff. Donna, to her credit, came to May privately one morning and apologized, not with grand gestures or rehearsed words, just a simple and honest, I was wrong, and I'm sorry. May accepted it. Because May understood that people were complicated, and that good people sometimes did thoughtless things, and that grace wasn't the same as pretending something didn't happen. The gossip in Ashford didn't stop all at once. It never does. It just slowly lost energy, the way a fire does when nobody feeds it anymore. A few people who'd been the loudest voices found themselves looking quietly foolish when the story they'd built turned out to have no foundation under it. Derek came back, not with a truck and boots and a confrontation, but with a 6-pack of Colton's favorite beer and an apology. Colton let him in, and May stayed. Not because she had nowhere else to go, not because she felt obligated. She stayed because Harlow Estate, that big, old, quiet house on the hill, had started to feel like home.